Well, this doesn't want to cooperate today. Very good. We're off to a great start. It's the Andy Poland Show, and today we're going from 9 to 11. Tony's up at 11 today, and for whatever reason...
Starts.
Oh, there we go.
Right now.
Well, we didn't have the right button push, that's why. Okay. Now we're ready to start. Whew. Didn't get off the ground very well today, did we? Yeah, there's a lot of time to be spent today on the latest Commanders loss. It's... well, like other ones this year, the defense wasn't good, didn't run the ball enough, made big mistakes. Ron Rivera is being debated on his decision not to go for two when they scored the touchdown to tie the game with less than a minute left. There's a lot of things to unpack there, and we'll go through that. Also, this was 31 years ago today that Riddick Bowe became heavyweight champion of the world as he beat Evander Holyfield. It was the first of three fights that they would have. Bowe would win two of them, but his career was checkered by some bad decisions, his inability to stay in shape. He could have been one of the greatest heavyweight champions of all time. As it is, he's in the top 20, and today was probably, 31 years ago today, was probably the highlight of his career when he beat Riddick Bowe in a unanimous decision, and we'll look back on that in the 10 o'clock hour. A couple of things on my radar that may not be on yours from the weekend before we launch into the Commanders. Number one, Maryland played in a tournament this weekend in Asheville. It's called the Asheville Championship, and they were god-awful. They were terrible. They won their opening game of the year against Mount St. Mary's, and they didn't play that well in that game. But, you know, a lot of teams have trouble getting out of the box. You go play on the road in the second game of the season with an experienced team. You got a fifth-year senior in Dante Scott, and he was awful in both of those games. I know he had 13 points yesterday, but you have to have seen the game to realize how bad he was. And Maryland lost both games by 3 points. You say, well, you know, that doesn't look that bad. No, you have to have watched the games to know how bad they were. They lost to Davidson 64-61 on Friday night, and yesterday afternoon they played at 12:30, which made it convenient to watch the game if you wanted to watch the Commanders, because it was over long before that game started in Seattle. And Maryland was actually up at the half. Looked like they were finally hitting some shots. Their three-point shooting this year has been horrendous. And they look like, okay, they're finally, finding their stroke there. Jameer Young, who had a terrific year last year, was probably the MVP of the team, was going to get going, and they're going to try and figure this thing out. Well, in the second half, they let UAB score the first 6 points, finishing up a 10-0 run from the first half, and they went on to win the game by 3 points. And that was really only with a really great Maryland comeback in the last few minutes of the game. It was just really, really bad. And I did not expect this for a team that returned its top three players, along with Julian Reese, who's talking about being in the NBA. Well, he put up only 4 shots yesterday. He scored 5 points before he fouled out. And, they have to run some of their offense around him. They run it in the high post for him, which means he tries to back his way back down in the lane to try and put up a little hook shot, or he kicks out to somebody for a three, and even with wide open threes, they're not even coming close. Some of these balls aren't even hitting the rim. That's how bad they are at three-point shooting. So they got a tough game coming up on Friday at Villanova. The only good news for them is they got 4 days of practice to get ready for it, because otherwise they look like they're totally out of sorts. And again, for a team that has a veteran nucleus that went to the NCAA tournament last year and won a game, they look so far away from being that quality. It's remarkable, just remarkable to me how bad they are. And you might say, well, what are you doing spending so much time on Maryland? Yeah, I mean, based on the way it was treated in media, the Washington Post didn't send a reporter there. They had wire stories for both games, including today. And the two announcers that did it on ESPN did it from their houses. ESPN didn't even deem it worthy to send a couple of announcers to spend 3 days in Asheville, North Carolina. How much could a couple of hotel rooms cost? Didn't do it. These guys did the games from their houses. I don't even remember who they were, but this was this was so totally off anybody's radar except for mine. And the reason is, and maybe I've told you this, but I think that you hit your peak of sports fandom when you're 14 years old. It's before you start really worrying a lot about girls, worrying about college, worrying about the rest of your life. The most important thing for some of us is sports at 14. So when I was 14, we had 2 teams in town. No baseball team. The Senators left the year before. There was no hockey team. The Caps didn't come into existence until I was 16 years old. And the basketball team didn't arrive until October of 1973. So when I was 14 going on 15, the thing I cared most about, 2 things, were the Washington Redskins and Maryland basketball, and they were both really good. George Allen took the Redskins to the Super Bowl in the 72 season, and Lefty Driesell began building his great program as Len Elmore and Tom McMillan were sophomores in that they were juniors actually in that 72-73 season, and there was hope that they could maybe even compete for a national championship. So those are the 2 things I cared about, and now I'm 65 years old, and I still care the most about them. I love the fact that the Nats won the World Series. I was all in on that. That was great. We've had an NBA team for a long time, including, believe it or not, in my lifetime, one that won an NBA championship. And the hockey team winning the Stanley Cup was really cool. But for me, the 2 most important local sports have always been Maryland basketball and the Washington Redskins. And right now, both of them stink, which leads me to what happened yesterday in Seattle. Now, the final score doesn't indicate that they were bad. And in fact, winning in a tough place like that was going to be difficult to do with a quarterback who was only making his, 11th NFL start yesterday. And for a while, they were doing some really, really good things. The couple of big plays that were made by Brian Robinson, mainly on what they call unscheduled plays. We used to call it scrambling. Now it's called unscheduled, where Sam Howell was looking for somebody to hit, and he tossed short passes to Robinson, and he got huge gainers out of it. But the big thing for me is they didn't run the ball. They ran the ball only 14 times. That's not enough, and that's been a problem all year long with them offensively. Not to mention the defense, which week after week gives up big yardage and points. They're near the bottom of the league. I believe they're 26th or 27th in yards allowed, and they're 30th, I think, in points allowed. And it's just the same old story week after week with a secondary that's been disappointing. Now, Emmanuel Forbes, who got his starting job back, didn't last long yesterday. He got tossed for a helmet-to-helmet hit, which was a ridiculous call. It should have been unnecessary roughness, but to get thrown out of the game for that was absolutely foolish. I was hit on Tyler Lockett, he wasn't ejected on the field. The video was seen in New York, and they said, yeah, throw him out of there. But that was a bad call. Who knows how much that hurt him? But defensively, they weren't very good at all, and we'll get into that. But I think the lingering thing from yesterday, and people were talking about it last night, and I'm sure going to be talking about it today, when Washington gets the tying touchdown with less than a minute to go, 52 seconds to go on the clock, Ron Rivera, instead of going for 2 and taking the lead at that point, now remember this, if they miss, they're behind, and then you got an onside kick. So, and the chances of recovery there are almost nil. So, at that point, Seattle gets the ball and they can run the clock out. By tying the game with the extra point, you extend the game. So I have no problem with it. But a lot of people say, whoa, whatever happened to Riverboat Ron? Why not gamble there? Doesn't he say, when you score late, you go for the win on the road? Well, they really wouldn't have been going for the win. They would have been going for the lead. And Seattle had 3 times. I think they had all 3 of their timeouts at that point. So they had time with a veteran quarterback, home crowd, et cetera. So they had time to get it down the field and turn it over to a kicker who was 4 for 4 in the game. So I don't really have any problem with what Rivera did. Some people do. Here's his explanation of why he didn't go for 2.
In talking and trying to get a feel for it, the biggest thing that you get concerned with is how much time was left. Because, again, when they don't have consequences, now the opportunity to move the ball down comes into play. You know what I'm saying? Because they had 2 timeouts left. So, again, it was one of those things that I liked our chances going into overtime. I liked the way that we moved the ball. We found a couple things that we felt we could exploit, and we did. We did it twice the last couple of drives. So just felt good going into overtime.
Before you talked about the importance of the philosophy of going for 2 on the road in particular, was it the time thing specifically here, or is that more of a philosophical shift?
Well, it's in the numbers, okay, and how much time was left, and that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't have a problem with him trying to extend the game and send it into overtime. Now, the defense, true, hadn't been stopping Seattle, but it wouldn't have made a difference. Again, if you go for 2 and you get it, you're only up by 1 at that point. And Seattle kicks a field goal, which they did, and they win the game by 2 instead of 3. They still win the game. So I don't really have a problem with that. And Sam Howell was asked, and it sounded like, and he's a competitor, that he wanted the opportunity to get out there and go for 2, but this was his response when asked about it.
Did you want to go for 2 there at the end?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I thought, we kind of had all the momentum, so it's like, let's play for overtime and think we can carry this momentum into overtime and win the game. I thought, our defense for the most part, was playing well. They got some good stops and they were forcing a lot of field goals, and I think there in the end we had a lot of momentum, and there was still a lot of time left. The game wasn't over. So I think kicking an extra point, I stand with, coach's decision. I think there was a lot of people that were on board with his decision. But us not going for 2 is not why we lost that football game.
I agree. I don't think that was the determining factor. Yeah, it would have put them up by 1, but with the field goal that they kicked and their ability to get down the field against the secondary, that wasn't very good yesterday. Benjamin St. Juste made some really good plays, made some really bad plays, including a penalty on a 4th and 5, which kept the drive alive, which allowed Seattle to score a touchdown, and he took the blame for that. We'll get to that in just a bit. But this was a key play in the first quarter where Emmanuel Forbes, who had been benched after getting torched in a couple of games, one of them really badly by A.J. Brown, has worked his way back into the starting lineup, and he didn't last very long as a starter yesterday. Kicked out after a helmet-to-helmet hit on Lockett, and this is Forbes in the locker room, a well-rested Forbes in the locker room after the game.
Were you pretty shocked that was an ejection?
Yes, I was in shock that it was an ejection. It wasn't like I was trying to kill him play. It was just a play. I was trying to make a play on the ball.
Did you see a replay of it at all?
Oh, I did once I got in the locker room.
And what did you think? Did you got anything different against him?
That's the only way I could have hit him to try to dislodge the ball, and I don't think it was a terrible hit.
No, it wasn't. It's football. He was trying to make a play, and the helmets collided. He did not target him. And I agree with what Rivera says here. Now, Rivera always pulls up a little bit because he's on the competition committee. So these kind of plays get discussed in the offseason, and he's on board with protecting the quarterback. He said that, or protecting a defenseless players, in this case, with Tyler Lockett, the wide receiver. And so he won't go nuts on officials, and, well, A, because he doesn't want to get fined, and B, because he's on the competition committee. Here's Rivera.
Well, it was a helmet-to-helmet. I just don't think it was a vicious one. The guy bounced up and went right back into the huddle, so it just didn't look like it was, and it really most certainly wasn't an intentional one because, he was lowering his target and the receiver went down to protect himself at the same time, and that created the helmet-to-helmet. I know the onus is on the defensive player to miss that, but sometimes it's an incidental one. I mean, I get the helmet-to-helmet call, but I struggle with the ejection.
Yeah, of course. Now, after the game, Walt Anderson, the head of the officiating crew, issued this report as a pool report to all the reporters who wanted to know about that play. And he said, what we were looking to try to avoid is helmet-to-helmet contact. It was certainly not a bang-bang type of play where you have both the defender and the receiver just playing for the ball. We want players to stay away from helmet-to-helmet contact. We're also looking at, is the defender making the attempt to play the ball, or is he making no attempt to separate the ball from the player in terms of going straight for the head? And in this case, it was the latter where he just went straight for the head, and that's why it rose to the level of disqualification. I didn't see the play that way. He's a rookie guy. He's like one of the skinniest guys in the league. I think he weighs like 170 pounds. Not a headhunter. He's not. Now, he could actually be suspended, but, I can't believe when they get a further look at this. Now, on the field, he was not ejected. He was ejected when the tape was seen in New York, and that's when the call was made. They are doing more and more to protect receivers. There's no question about it. And playing defensive back is becoming one of the toughest jobs there is. Benjamin St-Juste asked about the Forbes play after the game and how he himself deals with a changing NFL where it is almost impossible to cover wide receivers.
I'm gonna keep playing the way I'm gonna keep playing, honestly, because I'd rather take that flag than come in and be scared of it and he catch the ball and he end up scoring, whatever. I'd rather take my chances and take that flag, and if they see some sort of contact or whatever, we can't touch them or whatever, it is what it is. But I'm not gonna play timid and play scared because we're in a new generation of officiating.
Yeah, it's pretty well said there by St-Juste, and I don't know what you do, but I think they have to take a further look at this in the offseason. I understand what they're trying to do. I understand they're trying to protect the players, but I think it's a lot about perception. Football is football, and players running at full speed, colliding. You're going to have helmet to helmet. If it's clearly a targeting situation, which was the case with Logan Thomas when he scored that touchdown in Denver, that was clearly targeting, and that should have been an ejection, and it was. But this one, no. Didn't look anything like that. Now, here's my big gripe from yesterday. Seattle defense has been giving up a lot of yards on the ground. They gave up almost 300 last week to Baltimore, 298 yards. And in Jerry Brewer's column today in the Post, he says the Seahawks defense had allowed 193.3 rushing yards per game, a clip of 5.5 yards a carry, with 5 rushing touchdowns over its 3 previous games. But Sam Howell dropped back to pass on 17 of the first 21 plays. And even more galling is the number of carries that Washington had yesterday. They only had 14 carries on the day. Brian Robinson carried the ball 8 times. I know he made big catches, 6 of them for 119 yards. But 8 carries. It's not enough. Antonio Gibson, 4 carries for 13 yards. He did a nice job on the kickoffs, by the way. They didn't kick it into the end zone. He took almost all the kickoffs back. But no. Oh, you got to give these guys the ball. I know it's not the old days of John Riggins and 35 carries, but my God, 8 carries? It's not enough against the defense that couldn't stop the run. And they didn't have to yesterday because Washington is incredibly pass happy. And has that put them in this position of being 4-6? Maybe not, but it hadn't helped. Some of these games where they get away from the run and stay away from the run. When they went to it in the fourth quarter, it was great in putting together a drive. I think Robinson had back-to-back carries of like 10 yards apiece. And it helped them to set up the pass, which it did last week in New England. Same thing. But they don't stay with it. They go to the pass all the time. And, yes, Sam Howell is rolling up some tremendous numbers. He's among the league leaders in passing. I think he's third. Threw for 312 yards yesterday. 29 of 44. Did not throw an interception. Had a fumble, but did not throw an interception. But you got to have more balance than that. And remember, just last year when they were talking about being a 2-to-1 ratio run to pass? Remember that just last year? You don't have to go that far, but a lot closer to 50-50 than it is right now, and it's not even close to that. This is a pass-happy team that's got a record that it deserves, 4-6. And incredibly, this is how bad the Giants are. The Giants are 10-point underdogs coming here on Sunday. Imagine that. A 4-6 team, which can't stop anybody, is a 10-point favorite. It's a home game, but a 10-point favorite in a divisional game. Mind-blowing. We'll get to what went on over the weekend with Michigan, where we had Jim Harbaugh getting suspended like really hours before they played at Penn State. Didn't hurt him, but that remains right now among the biggest controversies in college football. We also have the Jimbo Fisher buyout to talk about. But, that was a huge deal, and it didn't wind up hurting Michigan as they won the game. But Ryan Leaf, who's a regular with Dan Patrick, had some thoughts on Harbaugh and the kind of guy he knew as a teammate in San Diego. We'll get to that and more as we continue with the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right, we got Tony coming up today at 11 o'clock. This was really bizarre how this all went down on Friday with finally the Big Ten coming up with a suspension for Jim Harbaugh for the rest of the regular season. He actually got on the plane in the morning on Friday with his team to fly to State College to play Penn State on Saturday. And just as he got off the plane, they said, oh, yeah, you're going to have to be in the hotel room because the Big Ten has suspended you. Now, they've hired Williams & Connolly, big law firm here, and they have, I think there's a hearing this week about that. They weren't able to get an injunction in time to get Harbaugh on the sidelines. They didn't need him. They still beat Penn State without him. They won't need him this week when they play Maryland here. But they've got the Ohio State game coming up, and you would like to have Jim Harbaugh on the sidelines, and I wonder if they can get an injunction. If they don't, and they manage to beat Ohio State, then they would be in the playoff, assuming they win the Big Ten championship, the championship game. They would be in the playoff, and Harbaugh comes back because the playoff is not run by the NCAA or the Big Ten, and everybody would be happy. Michigan would have Harbaugh back. The suspension had already been served. Everybody in the conference will make money with Michigan going to the playoff, and it'll be fine. And maybe the Big Ten figured, this probably be the best way to do it. You know, we get out in front of it and don't wait for the NCAA to drop the hammer on us. We'll just handle it this way and see how it works out. I don't think Jim Harbaugh is going to be the coach at Michigan next year. I think he's going to go to the NFL, and I think that Michigan, I don't think they'll win the championship. I think Georgia's still that good, but they may have an opportunity to get to the championship game if things hold up the way they are right now in the standings. And they did not change from last week, but I got to imagine Georgia's going to be up to number 1 this week, and Michigan would be number 2, and that's how they line up in the polls right now. So if they were to meet in the championship, he would have gotten them there, and everybody would have made money. And then Harbaugh's off to coach the either the Bears, or there's probably going to be 3 or 4 other openings, including one here. I would not be opposed to seeing Jim Harbaugh coach the Commanders. I know it's short term, but he'd breathe some life into them, and they'd be a good team for a while. And then he'd wear out his welcome, and he'd be gone. But I'd like to see that happen. Meantime, after just clobbering Mississippi State over the weekend, 51-10. Texas A&M announced yesterday that Jimbo Fisher is out. He's out because the athletic department felt they were stuck in neutral. Well, it's an expensive fix to get out of this. They're going to have to pay close to $77 million in what's left of his contract. And the contract has a clause. Most of these contracts don't have this, but the contract has a clause that says he gets all the money if they fire him. There's a buyout in there. I don't know what the buyout was if somebody wanted to hire him, and this is why it's ramped up to this point where coaches are making this kind of money, where he has $77 million left on his contract, and they still agree to get rid of him. It just doesn't work. And Dan Wolkin of USA Today wrote about this today. He said, just a handful of years ago, it was a big deal, a stain on your program even, if the cost of firing a coach hit $10 million. But once that threshold was crossed, the economics of the sport started veering into something resembling fraud. Maybe not in the legal sense, but certainly in the ethos and spirit of it. And it all goes back to one thing. The people who run college football have decided to sanction a completely open, unfettered market for coaching talent that contradicts that contracts are only written to be enforceable in one direction, which is clearly the case with Fisher. You know, he gets all the money, and if he wants to coach someplace else next year for another $5 or $6 million or whatever they pay him, he's still going to get all the money. And Wilkin writes, in college, the only part of the contract that really matters is how much it will cost for the school to get out of it. And in this case, the boosters, well, you know, $77 million, so be it. Fisher had been at Florida State, and he won his national championship. He was making something like $4 million a year there, and Texas A&M says, "Oh, we'll give you a lot more money than that." He has a good year there. Signs after signing a 10-year, $75 million deal, a deal so good they're afraid he's going to leave. So they sweeten the deal with a 10-year, $95 million extension. It's just crazy how much money there is, and I think when the final story is written, and we look back on what happened to college sports, 20 years from now, 25 years from now, maybe 50 years from now, this will be a symbol. It all really got crazy when Texas A&M had to give Jimbo Fisher $77 million to go away, and that was the same week that Deion Sanders' son's Rolls-Royce was booted on the campus of Colorado. It went from, we can't give these athletes extra benefits, we can give them a bagel, but cream cheese is extra benefits, to a player's Rolls-Royce getting booted on campus and a coach getting $77 million. But the NCAA said for years, we can't afford to pay the players. We just can't do it. There's no money. Wow. And I just look at this as a quaint notion. I looked this up because I remember it well. Debbie Yao, who was the athletic director at Maryland, had kind of gone crazy with the budget. Ralph Friedgen, who she hired eventually, she hired a guy by the name of Ron Vanderlinden, who had been an assistant at Penn State. And after 3 losing seasons, Boomer Esiason finally talked her into hiring Ralph Friedgen, who had been one of Boomer's assistants, I think the offensive coordinator when he played at Maryland in the 80s, early 80s. And Ralph had gone on to become one of the top assistants working for Bobby Ross. They won a national championship at Georgia Tech. They also worked together with the Chargers, getting them to the Super Bowl. Really great coach, and he led them to 10-win seasons, 3 straight 10-win seasons. So Debbie went nuts, and she spent $50 million to add to the stadium, which was then called Bird Stadium, put the upper deck on there. And then things didn't go as well. 2004 to 2008, they were kind of a pretty good team, but not a great team. They were 33-28. They were going to bowls, but not big bowls. And then in his 9th year, Ralph had a really tough season. They lost at Cal in the opening game, 52-13, finished the year 2-10. And there were $4 million left on the contract. How quaint was this? $4 million. And rather than firing him and giving him the $4 million to go away, Debbie Yao went to donors to ask if they could pay for the buyout. She even went to see Governor Martin O'Malley to see if the state would pay for it. They said no. And so Ralph stayed another year, and he was coach of the year. They went 9-4, I believe. They won the Military Bowl. But Kevin Anderson thought he was too fat and fired him. And he got $2 million in the buyout. But that's what it was and it's Maryland, it's not Texas A&M, but that's what it was in 2010. It was $4 million to get rid of him, and she couldn't do it. And now in 2023, Texas A&M is stroking a check for $77 million and not looking back. Just amazing. And again, they had no money in college football. And more on the Harbaugh story. This was Ryan Leaf on Friday on the Dan Patrick Show. And Ryan Leaf, for all the troubles that he's had in his life, he's been an addict. He's been to jail. He attempted suicide at one point. He embraces the role or title of the biggest bust in NFL history. He's had quite a life and has become a really good football analyst. Works for Westwood One, works for Fox, and appears regularly on the Patrick Show. And this was on Friday when they got to talking as we were waiting for the ultimate suspension for Jim Harbaugh. As we were waiting for it to happen, they got to talking about Harbaugh, and Patrick asked this.
Sign stealing doesn't bother you?
No, the way they did it, I think I've said this before. I think it's just they were more clever. They worked harder. They had a plan in place. I will say this: Jim Harbaugh, of course, was my backup quarterback in San Diego my second and third year, and I've never been around a guy that's more competitive than Jim Harbaugh. More competitive. He would want to win at every single thing. So it doesn't surprise me that if this is true, that there was this elaborate sign stealing scheme that existed, because that dude wants to win at everything.
Give me an example of what was he annoying to be around?
You know what? He wasn't, because I was rather annoying as a competitive guy my whole life. I had to win too at everything, and I had a bad attitude when I would lose, and so him and I kind of got along. And what was funny was when we were competing my third year, when they had brought him in and I was hurt my whole second year, they let us fight it out to be the starter again, because no one expected me to be the starter again in year 3. And we went and competed like crazy. And in that Atlanta game, the third preseason game, I started 9 for 9 with a touchdown pass. And I remember after that game, sitting in the locker next to him, he looked at me and he's like, we went to war, we competed, you won. And then he just put his hand behind my back and started coaching me up and supported me. He taught me how to be a professional. By the time I had blown it all in San Diego, when I got down to Tampa and Dallas, I was an actual teammate and a professional. I just wasn't as talented. I had hurt my wrist. I wasn't the guy to be a starter anymore, but I knew how to be a professional quarterback. And I owe that to Jim Harbaugh and the support and the competition he gave me to try to win that job in year 3.
I'm going to guess your social lives would have been different in San Diego, you and Harbaugh.
Yeah, they were pretty different. But, that second year, I fell into a relationship with what I thought was going to solve everything, was to date and to marry the most beautiful and popular former Charger cheerleader. Because then everybody would love Ryan Leaf, right? They love her. Instead they looked at her like, what is wrong with that woman? She must be nuts to go and be with that guy. So that backfired on me too. So I was pretty much a homebody by that time. My rookie year was where I was like, Playboy Mansion, all over the place and stuff like that. By year 2 and 3, when Harbaugh showed up, I was pretty settled down.
What happened at the Playboy Mansion?
A lot of great things.
What? Can you be vague with me?
Well, the parties where the women came painted, when they went through the whole process of painting on the outfits.
Were we at the Playboy Mansion at the same time?
We may have been. I don't know.
I went there on a paint night, and I just remember the Dom triplets were there. So all I remember, and yeah, we might have been there. I
was there. I was there 3 separate times.
Oh, okay.
And they're fond memories. That's all I can say about it. I mean, I was 22 years old. I somehow was given millions of dollars. I don't think I was very handsome, but the millions of dollars made me seem more handsome, I think, in a lot of senses. But anyway, there'll be memorable times for me to remember, especially with you here, Dan, on the show.
I remember Drew Carey was there, and Salami from the White Shadow.
I remember. What? Pauly Shore. Pauly Shore was there.
I think he was always there, wasn't he?
Yeah, he may have lived there. He may have lived in the cages with the peacocks and stuff outside the grotto. But I was just really in awe. The kid from Montana, the redneck hick from Montana, was just kind of like, is this real? And I had 2 of my boys with me who came from Montana too, like the original Entourage feel to it. And we were just in awe. We show up on the Sunset Strip and go to the Sky Bar and Dublin's, and it was just like, I should have known that, like, I wasn't long for the spotlight when I was just like, this is crazy fun, good stuff. Let's go.
So I left that stuff in at the end about the Playboy Club because I think it just illustrates how nuts things can get, especially for a guy like Ryan Leaf who wasn't prepared for that, now has the great perspective of it. But he's looking at this sign stealing, and it is, relatively minor stuff. It's just that it was rampant cheating. They were so blatant about it. You had this guy who was showing up in disguises on sidelines. I mean, it's just crazy. But I think football people look at it like, that's kind of like what happens there. Coming up in the next hour, more on the defensive struggles of this team, why it's happening, and their reasons for only giving the ball to running backs 14 times, 14 carries in this game. I think even 12 went to running backs. Howell ran a couple of times. So why they are so hesitant to run and what the players and coaches are saying about it as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Yeah, we're going to take a further look at what happened yesterday to the Commanders in Seattle, what it means for the rest of the season, and what it means for the development of a quarterback who looks like the goods. Yeah, they've been wandering in the quarterback desert for a long, long time, ever since they left Kirk Cousins out and allowed Minnesota to snap them up, and have just had one quarterback after another since. They may have their guy. They were never really enamored with Kirk. That's why they futzed around with the contract and franchised him 2 years in a row and just, totally mishandled the whole situation. In a perfect world, there's a Shanahan still coaching the team and there's a Cousins still playing quarterback, but just didn't work out that way because of the ownership. And we now have new ownership, which is a nice thing, and maybe a quarterback. So, if you go into this season, into the 2023 season, and you say at the end of it, you won't have a playoff team, but you'll have a new owner and you'll have a quarterback who you can count on maybe for the next 10 years if things go well, you take it, right? So I think, where they are right now, they're 4-6 and really need an unbelievable month and a half to make the playoffs. And even if they do make the playoffs, where are they going to go? But it looks like this is the guy. It looks like Sam Howell is the guy, and I'll get more into that in just a moment. I did over the weekend go see a movie. I haven't seen many movies since the pandemic started for a variety of reasons, but I did go to see a movie that Ann Hornaday had given a great review to in the Washington Post, and it's called The Holdovers. And, not a high-budget movie, no really, really big stars. The biggest star and the one who takes up most of the time in the movie is Paul Giamatti, who's, not Tom Hanks. He's not necessarily a leading man, but a great character actor, has been in a whole bunch of different things. Maybe his most famous role is in Sideways, about the wine country. And he stars in this movie. And if I give you the plot, it sounds like a Hallmark movie. It takes place at Christmas time of 1970. It's based at a boarding school in upstate New York, and most of the kids are headed out for their 2-week Christmas break. But there are some, because of a variety of circumstances, who are going to have to spend the Christmas break at the school. And Paul Giamatti, who's had his share of troubles in his life and is a teacher of history there, is, because what he had done, assigned to watch over the students who they called the holdovers, the ones who couldn't go home for Christmas break. And the reason he's assigned this is because he failed the son of a rich donor, keeping him from going to an Ivy League school. So the headmaster said, well, as your penance here, you're going to have to do this. And, he's got kind of a look at life where he put it this way. He said, life is like the henhouse steps. It's essy and it's short. Okay, so that was pretty much his outlook on life, and he channeled that to the students who hated his guts, and and then there's the cook who's undergone personal tragedy. She's played by Divine Joy Randolph, who's new. I had not seen her or familiar with her, and then Dominic Sessa, who I'm also not familiar with, played Angus Tully, who's a kid whose parents are going through some things, and he winds up staying at the school. And over the course of the 2 weeks, the three of them essentially become like family. So it's three troubled souls coming together. It's a Hallmark movie plot, but it's very well done, and it stays true to the period. It's Christmas time, 1970, transitioning to 1971, so it's a very turbulent time in the country with the Vietnam War going on and protests and so forth. And it's really good. It's a tremendous movie. I wouldn't say you're going to say, oh, you're going overboard because you don't see many movies. Yeah, that's probably true, but it's very good. It's a very good movie. It's called The Holdovers, and I was thinking about Paul Giamatti. And I was talking with our program director, Bill Hess, and our news director, John Matthews, this morning, and neither one of them knew that he's the son of Bart Giamatti, the former president of Yale and the baseball commissioner who banned Pete Rose for life. And I was thinking, how many people have become even more famous than their famous fathers in a field that is totally unrelated? You have great athletes, the Mannings, for example. The father was a tremendous quarterback and produced two sons. One is in the Hall of Fame. The other one may be there. 4 Super Bowl championships between the two of them. Okay, you have that, but that's the family business. The family business for Giamatti was academia and baseball. And Paul Giamatti has gone in a totally different direction. Now, Yale has a really good drama school. I don't know whether he went there or not, but he has become a very prominent actor, and I just love almost anything he's in. They're not Tom Hanks type of movies where you make, $100 million at the box office, but he just is a very good and relatable actor. And I'm not sure, but I believe he should be nominated for an Academy Award for this movie. I would think that he'll get a nomination for Best Actor in this movie. It's called The Holdovers, and it just came out this past weekend, and I saw it, and I liked it. Did we like what we saw yesterday from the Commanders? Well, we like what we saw from Sam Howell, mostly. He did have a fumble. He was sacked 3 times, but when the game was on the line, he was able to take his team down the field, not get rattled, show some patience, was moving more in the pocket than he had been in the past, and really is seemingly developing into an outstanding quarterback. Now, we do see regressions in quarterbacks, so you have to be kind of aware of that. Mac Jones was pretty good as a rookie for the Patriots. I don't know if you watched this game in Germany yesterday. He was horrible. He was absolutely horrible in a horrible game. The Colts won 10-6. How these two teams combined for 16 points, I have no idea because they both stink. But they stunk worse. And Bill Belichick, who once had the best organization in football and was considered to be the best coach of all time, is fading quickly, and it's almost certain that he won't be back next year. There's even some talk that if they didn't win yesterday, he wasn't coming home with the team from Germany. I guess he did get on the plane, and so far we haven't heard anything, but that was just a terrible loss yesterday. So as good as Sam Howell is now, Mac Jones was trending in the right direction too and is not. I'm not saying that's going to happen with him, but it's not necessarily over. In terms of over being, he's established, he's the franchise quarterback. Around this time next year, they're going to start talking about giving him a long-term extension that will pay him $50 million a year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He's still going to be under team control for 2 more years. There's still more that you have to see, but you got 7 games to go this year and all of next year before you really have to make a decision on what you're going to do with Hal. He still has 2 years left after this year, so theoretically, they could let him get to free agency. But more than likely, if he continues to play like this, they're going to start talking about a long-term contract in about a year. Meantime, the defense, which Ron Rivera said was going to carry the team, was not good again yesterday. Now, they have lost games this year where the defense was absolutely horrendous. It was not last week against the Patriots, but the Patriots are self-destructive and they stink. And the defense still gave up a 64-yard touchdown run. The week before, they gave up 38 to the Eagles against a hapless Giants team with a backup quarterback playing, Tyrod Taylor. They were beaten 14-7. They did hold the Falcons to 16 on the road, okay, but the Bears scored 40 here. The Eagles scored 34, won in overtime. The Bills in week 2 scored 37. The Broncos, even though they lost, scored 33. And yesterday, another big offensive day as Seattle, which was having trouble getting out of its own way, scored only 3 points at Baltimore and was getting run over, giving up almost 200 yards rushing a game over the last 3, 298 last week at Baltimore. Didn't really have to face much of a run game yesterday because the Commanders didn't run the ball much. But the defense gave up 489 yards yesterday. 489 yards. Seattle had 27 first downs. 27 first downs, Coach Ron Rivera.
I think there were a couple things that were inconsistent, as far as opportunities to stop the run. We got to be better and put ourselves in better situations as far as second down situations. Second and short, 2nd and 6, 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4. That's just that's tough to defend there.
And some big plays too. The drive that Seattle had where they scored their last touchdown. They won the game on a field goal where they scored their last touchdown. Added 4 and 5, and it looked like Benjamin St-Juste made a stop, but he got called for defensive holding. A penalty kept the drive alive and allowed Seattle to get it in the end zone. This is St-Juste after the game.
On that 4th and 5, that was tough. That kind of changed the game a little bit. And then towards the end, I could have made a better judgment call, like him running the slant, thinking that was going to be something else, So, yeah, that's on me, and that's life. I need to get back up and work better because, I cost my team, a win, possible win.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you blame it on him, but he certainly didn't help. And the secondary overall wasn't good, and I don't think it's because Emmanuel Forbes got kicked out for a helmet-to-helmet hit in the first quarter. He's been back in the starting lineup, or was yesterday, but still has yet to prove that he's going to live up to what they hoped for when they took him in the first round of the draft. Now, this is Howell after the game, and I mentioned I keep harping on the lack of running, but when you only get 8 carries for Brian Robinson and 4 carries for Antonio Gibson, to me, that's not an effective offense. They threw up the numbers yesterday. They were talking a lot about it if you watch the game, is they are the most pass-happy team in the league. And Sam Howell has dropped back more than any other quarterback in the league, including Patrick Mahomes, who knows what the hell he's doing once he drops back. He can get out of it. And Howell just continues to take sacks, though he has been more effective in recent weeks with an offense better designed for him and making plays on the run, and did a couple of times to Robinson. But their touchdown that was set up, the touchdown that they got to Antonio Gibson on a 19-yard pass in the fourth quarter, was set up by a very effective running game. They finally woke up and said, probably is a good idea to give the ball to Brian Robinson. And let me check my notes, but I think it was back-to-back 10-yard gains by Robinson when he got the ball. I think he carried the ball twice for 10-yard gains to set that up. And, you wonder where that was most of the game. This is Howell on his desire to run the ball, which they didn't do early. They threw the ball on 17 of their first 21 plays. Here's Howell on that.
Going in, our game plan is to try to get everybody involved. We want to establish the run game pretty early, and they did a good job stopping the run in the first half. So it made it tough. They did some good job, good stuff in coverage as well. And we just got to continue to just find ways to get people involved. It wasn't coming in. We weren't trying to throw the ball to B-Rob and AG a lot, but just kind of how the game goes sometimes. And they brought a good amount of pressure there in the first half too. And I think when we have pressure, those guys on the checkdowns are some good options. So that was part of it as well. But they did a good job. There was that one drive in the second half where they ran the ball well, and we had struggled to run the ball the whole game. But that drive, they just kept going, and O-line did a good job moving those guys. But and they gave us a chance today.
Yeah, and why didn't they do that more? Why did it wait until the fourth quarter? Because, as Howell says about the run game.
Yeah, it's huge. I think when you establish the running game in a football game, that you have a good chance to win the game. And obviously we struggled to do that early on, but on that drive, we just kept calling the same run concept, left and right. Out of 3x1 and 2x2, and the O-line was doing a good job. B-Rob and AG, they were hitting the holes, and it's fun to watch. I think when we can run the ball like that, run the ball effectively, it opens stuff up in the passing game as well, and it just makes our offense harder to stop.
Yeah. Last week the touchdown pass to Jahan Dotson that won the game at New England, set up by a couple of big running plays. It's football 101. Why don't you do that? Why are you so hesitant to run the football? It just doesn't make sense. This is the explanation from Ron Rivera as to why they once again came out throwing, and finally in the fourth quarter woke up to the idea, maybe it'd be a good idea to run the ball.
We were having success attacking them through the air. And, again, as I said, later on in the game, we found a couple things that we liked, and we stuck to it, and it put us right back in the game.
Was that a conversation on the sideline when they did start having that success running the ball? How did you guys figure out that adjustment? I think it was like beginning of the fourth quarter.
Yeah, it was something that EB saw and brought up and just put it into action.
Okay. Again, where was this? Oh, it takes EB until the fourth quarter to realize you can run the ball. You spend all week studying tape, and then you get in the game and you're throwing and throwing and throwing. Oh, yeah, maybe we should run the ball. And they did. And they did run the ball. This is Sam Cosmi. Now, I've known enough offensive linemen over the years to know that they're always saying they want to run the ball. And the reason they want to run the ball is it's a lot easier to deliver a blow than to take a blow. It's tough to pass block. Not that it isn't tough to run block, but you're coming at the defender rather than the defender coming at you. That famous sideline NFL films film of Peyton Manning arguing with Jeff Saturday, and Saturday is yelling about running the ball, and Manning comes over and he gets angry at him and he says, "Jeff, we are going to run the ball. We're going to run the ball." So that's always the attitude. And this is Sam Cosmi, a guard. If you listen between the lines here, he's saying, why the hell are we throwing the ball on every down? We need to run the football.
You saw us picking up steam once we started running the ball, so it was fun to run the ball 4 straight times in a row down their throat, me personally, I love doing that. So
how hard is it? They always talk about backs and get to rhythm in the run game as a running back for a line. How important is it to get some in a row just to get that rhythm?
I mean, no doubt, it's very important for everyone. I mean, you don't want to be a one-dimensional offense in a lot of things, so being able to run the ball and run it successfully and give confidence not only to the offense and to EB and all that stuff. So being able to do that was a good stretch, and obviously turned into more successful plays going down the field.
Yeah. So when the Giants come to town next week, how about it? How about giving the ball to your stud running backs who are healthy? And that's another thing about this team. It's too bad they're 4-6 because they have just about every starter. I think they lost a starting linebacker along the way. But this team is healthy. They're healthy, and they're healthy at the skill positions. They look at the teams around the league, and Sam Howell has taken every single snap. These quarterbacks, including the one that they're going to face on Sunday, Tommy DeVito, who's living at home with his parents. There's a lot more Tommy DeVitos running around the league right now than Sam Howell. And yet they're underachieving as a football team. The defense has not been good, and the offense isn't scoring enough points to overcome that, and also not helping the defense enough by running the ball to keep them off the field. Sustain drives. They're not doing that because they're not, in my opinion, running the ball effectively. This is more from Cosme, and I think that this is the big takeaway from yesterday if you're looking for the glass half full angle of this. And that is that, and Dan Snyder said this for years, well, we got ourselves a quarterback. Well, I think that's what Cosme is saying about Sam Howell.
Dude's balling, man. He's been showing some crazy stuff. He's really developed you can see from the beginning of the year to now. I mean, it's just like, wow. And the thing that's really cool to see is he's taking the coaching and he's putting it out there, and he's getting the ball out when it needs to get out, and obviously he's just learning every week, and you can see him develop into a really, really special thing. So he made some plays out there that were just really, really special. So it's really good to see.
Yeah, they've been looking for a quarterback, and maybe Howell is the guy. So there we go. All right. Today, Ron Rivera speaks, so we'll hear what he has to say after looking at the video. And on Wednesday, we'll hear from the players and coordinators on Thursday as we roll through another week. It's November. There's a flicker of hope for the playoffs, but I think everything right now is focused on next year, who's going to be the coach, who's going to be the general manager. And as the last vestiges of the Dan Snyder era are scraped away, we'll see what this team looks like going forward. But having a quarterback to do that is a huge part of the equation. Tony's coming up next. I'll be back here tomorrow morning with another show at 9 a.m. See you then.